Hello, everyone, and welcome to another book talk. We are very excited today to talk about The Imagination Dilemma, a book written by Dr. Lydia Kostopoulos, and she has a tremendous background in working with all types of military organizations like the United Nations, U.S. Special Operations, the European Commission, NATO, and a number to talk about the intersection of technology and humanity. So welcome, Lydia.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I have known you for quite a while, and you were reintroduced to us by one of our strategic advisors, Robin Champ. And we are so excited to see you come back into our circle over and over again. And you just do so many amazing things, but coming up with the imagination dilemma, particularly from the perspective of Homeland Security, it's such a critical piece of preparing for the future and preparing for the present, really. So tell us a little bit about what spurred you to write the book.
Well, actually, while I don't have national security examples in the book, it's actually my experience working in national security that created this idea in my head of the imagination dilemma. And it was because I am predominantly hired to help strategic leaders think about emerging technologies, the use cases regarding whatever it is they're responsible for, and kind of do some blue sky thinking. And so I do that, and then I bring it to them. And then sometimes I find resistance, even though that's exactly what they asked for. And this is not only kind of exclusive, let's say, to the national security realm. This is actually everywhere. This is a human phenomenon, which is humans don't react super great to change. And I believe that it stems from imagination and a lack of that. And in this book, I characterize the different facets of imagination where I feel there are shortcomings.
Well, we also know imagination is often stifled by mainstream and certainly stifled by people's kind of self-imposed limitations. So, imagination is great when you're in kindergarten, but it slowly gets kind of chipped away as time goes by. Why do you think imagination is so important today?
Well, I think it's so important today because we have so much change happening. So I know that, the word unprecedented has been used so much, but it truly is the proper adjective to describe what we're experiencing right now. So it is unprecedented to have this many humans alive at once. Our global population is the highest it's ever been. And it is also unprecedented for our species to live in the climactic conditions that it is right now. And so we see the effects of climate change impacting our agriculture, livestock, humans. There's many people who are dying because of the heat. There are many urban settlements that are being destroyed because of mudslides and floods and fires and all of these things that it wasn't before. Insurance companies are having to either close shop or do their business differently. And then separately, socially, we're going through a new upheaval. That I wouldn't say is unprecedented because throughout our civilizational history, there have been changes in how we have organized ourselves. However, I think that grappling with the exponential technology change that we're experiencing right now and the social change that comes with it, because technology change brings us along with it social change. The speed at which it's happening is unprecedented. So just to give an example, 100 years ago when technology was changing, there was like decades to kind of adjust to it. Today, every day we're seeing a new thing that AI can do. And that is only increasing. And so I think that there's a lot to grapple with, and we need to be very imaginative to imagine a future that doesn't exist and has never existed before.
That can be said throughout history, right?
Yes.
Um,
The only difference is that now it's happening faster. That's all.
yes, absolutely. Well, and it's interesting to hear the conversations around how AI will replace humans and all of that kind of, not fear mongering exactly. It's preparation for reorganization of how people think about the world and how people work. And so it's very logical, but we when I thought about your book and I thought about imagination and the Homeland Security mission, I certainly thought back to 9/11 when, people were accused of having a lack of imagination of how much damage or that attack like that could happen. So, specifically to Homeland Security, how do you see the imagination playing into how we prepare the country and how we prepare our responders for, well, and frankly, the folks trying to prevent attacks? How can this help them?
Well, first of all, so in my book, I talk about four facets of imagination, and one of them is identity. And I think that that is so critical because we need to be able to reimagine our identity. So, as whether it's Homeland Security professionals or any other kind of national security professional, I think it's about re-examining and revisiting what it is we do as national security professionals, because the national security problems of today are very different than before. So right now, we're not, the border issues that we have are different compared to the border issues we had before. So right now, we're not, the military part of national security isn't as concerned about the borders as they are about cybersecurity borders or information borders, our social cohesion, the different aspects of our democracy, those kinds of borders that need protecting that are intangible, and we didn't have to think about them before the advent of the internet and all these other things. In terms of Homeland Security and borders, well, you've got illegal migration, human trafficking, and then you've got illegal goods, drugs, et cetera, and all of that. With those things, there's obviously artificial intelligence and all these other kinds of, amazing technologies. But the idea is really going back to the basics. What is the value that I deliver? Not as what is the value I delivered yesterday? What does my mission statement of yesterday say? It's what is the value overall? In my book, I call it, what are you in the business of doing? And then kind of like first principles, getting down to the very basics and saying, like, what is it that we do? How can we do it better? How can we do it faster? How can we deliver value more effectively? And I think that is the best way to go about it. And it's also most provocative because you'll find disagreements about what people think that they're in the business of doing. And a lot of people will say, so here's an example in academia. Some professors will say, what do you mean? I have to change my curriculum. I've been teaching this all this time. This is perfectly fine. And it's like, not anymore, because what you've been teaching is not relevant today. You need to upgrade. And it's like, well, I don't want to upgrade. And it's like, this is the change piece that people don't want to change. But in national security, it's the same thing. Like, we can't keep doing the same thing that we've done all the time and expect the same results.
Exactly. That's fascinating. So when you're talking with national security experts or Homeland Security folks, how do you kind of coach them to include or nurture imagination?
So what I try to do, several things. One of the things is when I talk about emerging technologies, I try to talk about things that are happening now or in the near future as something that's happening in the future, because I find that some people feel more comfortable stepping into it if it's not something that already happened today. Not everybody feels comfortable with this much drastic change, particularly if you're responsible for it. And that's one. So I try to ease them into the dramatic changes of technology and like what it could mean. And so it's like slowly building the knowledge base for it so they can feel more empowered to be like, okay, I understand where I am in this new space and this is what I want to do. Because ultimately, decision makers, they understand their organization and what they want to do, but sometimes there's a lot of new elements at play. And that's just technology. Another aspect of imagining the future or working with it is understanding the systems level aspect of it. So how does climate change impact what you're doing, even though you don't feel like you have anything to do with climate change, but there's, second, third, fourth order effects of it that affect you. And so it's like trying to understand the broader big picture. And so I try to help them understand where they are in that bigger picture to help them see the situation differently. And I find that that's quite effective. And then the identity of the individual and the organization, that's something I try to work on as well, to say, well, this is what you've delivered always, but can we reframe what it is you're doing? And to give you an example, I use Kodak. So Kodak thought themselves to be in the business of film and print photography. And so they were focused on all the advances in chemicals and printing and all that. However, Had they instead imagined their narrative and their identity to be in the business of memory preservation, they would have seen the whole world very differently. Digital cameras, NFTs, you name it, that's part of what they're doing if they're in the business of memory preservation. So it's the same thing, kind of saying, well, what are you really in the business of doing? Yes, you do film and print photography really well, but actually you're really about memory preservation. And then that opens the aperture to imagine differently.
That's an excellent example. How could the leaders of Kodak been better at adapting? I mean, you talk about people's resistance to change, and really, if the leaders are not advocates of that change and kind of, I don't know, like the leaders of that change, you don't see much happen, because if it gets shut down at the leadership level, it's kind of over. So how do you recommend that leaders approach change and imagination, kind of without fear? We certainly, in the government sector, there's a lot of fear of taking a risk because it often doesn't pay off. And so that risk aversion shuts a lot down, not just imagination, innovation. There's all kinds of things. I mean, there's all kinds of literature about making sure that leaders know how to adapt to change. But certainly, the government environment is different, and risk is a huge challenge for leaders. How do you recommend they kind of look at change? And I think some of the agile development that learn from failing fast, fail fast, fail often, and then readjust, that's helping people's mindset. But what do you recommend, or what do you recommend in your book?
Mindset and the identity narrative, I think, here are the most critical things. So the mindsets I talk about are having an abundance mindset. So one of the challenges is if you have a scarcity mindset and think, well, we couldn't do this, we can't do that. Instead saying, we can try, or even better, we can. That mindset really changes the aperture of what is possible for you and what you're willing to approve and not approve. Then you can start talking about fail fast and fail forward and experiments. But you can't have any of that if you don't have a mindset that is open to that. Also, there's like a narrative that you talked about, like not wanting to take risk. But if you switch that narrative around and say, actually, our competitors, our adversaries, like, we're not in a place to not take risk. We cannot afford actually to not take risks. So you spin that around and you say, what are the risks we're going to take? What are the big bets we're making? This is like a all hands affair. Let's start thinking about what are the risks we need to be taking right now so that we are doing our job properly, correctly, better, etc. And then the identity piece, that again, it's like about rethinking, and this is also for individuals in their personal life. People want to change, and there's a lot of research around like identity and changing behavior in your life. And if you want to like work out every day and be this kind of exercise person and you're not, you need to change your identity and say, like, I am this kind of person, and I'm going to buy the clothes, and I'm going to do the thing, and I'm going to, get up every day and try, and you keep trying. But it's when the stick happens is when you're inside your mind, it's changed, where you're like, I am this now. And it takes some time, but you can put the like little pieces in place to make that happen. And so in an organization, you can have some like friendly competitiveness and say, we're going to be the department that does things differently, the one that experiments, the one that's going to be ahead of this curve. And I think that kind of mindset changes things to be more imaginative.
That's excellent. Well, so I encourage all of our listeners and our readers to pick up The Imagination Dilemma. It's available on Amazon. And this is certainly not our last conversation with Lydia. Lydia, we welcome you to engage with HS Today however you'd like to help educate and inform leadership throughout the Homeland Security community, and certainly everyone fighting for a safe and safer America. So thank you so much for your time today. And again, you can get The Imagination Dilemma on Amazon, and this interview will be available on HS Today's website. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you.